What if there was a time when the rigid laws of reality were not yet carved into stone, but warped by the restless ambitions of the Anunnaki Gods themselves? The oldest Sumerian tablets whisper of a breathtaking journey taken by the Queen of Heaven herself into a place where even the most supreme gods were stripped of their power. Her name was Inanna, also known as Ishtar, one of the brightest and most highly respected deities in the divine assembly, who willingly chose to step away from her palace of eternal light in the stars, embarking on a perilous voyage into a hidden realm of dust and darkness deep below the surface of the earth, a realm guarded by 7 magical gates, feared by mortals and immortals alike, a land from which, supposedly, there was no return. So, how did she do it? These secrets can be found in the heart of a timeless Sumerian legend that challenges everything we know about life, death, and the delicate balance of the universe. It is the daring epic of a bold descent into the deepest layers of the earth, as well as an unprecedented resurrection that would ultimately dictate the natural cycles of the entire world as we now know it. Tonight, we trace her incredible path through this lost place in time, exploring a sweeping cosmic mystery that turns the night sky into a gateway to a forgotten world. The sand-swept remnants of human history invite us back through the ages, offering a small glimpse of this incredible civilization through the thousands of clay artifacts that have been excavated from the very heart of the ancient Mesopotamian Empire. And these are no ordinary records, because deep within the ruins of those sacred libraries, like those found at Nippur, cuneiform artifacts reveal a stunning picture of the earliest known concepts of the Underworld. The first scribes knew this sunken kingdom as Ker or Urkala, but to them this dark realm was not a place of fiery punishment, like we now associate with later biblical interpretations of the afterlife. Instead, it functioned as a vital baseline for the inner workings of the universe itself, a necessary balancing mechanism to complement the vibrant movement of the living world above. In their eyes, Ker was the very foundation of all cosmic law, serving as a peaceful, dusty sanctuary where all souls, be they gods or kings, priests, heroes, or even common travelers alike, all inevitably return to find their eternal rest within its quiet embrace. Such an intricate system required its own uncompromising order, governed by an intricate network of ancient rulers, arcane gatekeepers, and inflexible laws that demanded absolute submission from anyone who crossed its threshold. Silent attendants walked through dim corridors to ensure every new arrival was properly recorded. No divine being or mortal hero could ever find a way around its strict parameters. The true scale of this ancient legend extends far beyond a single queen's journey into the depths, tracing not only the trials she would face at the entrance to the Underworld, but the chilling cosmic consequences of attempting to reverse an irreversible fate. To escape the heavy gravity of the great below would require an even greater sacrifice than that which was required to enter it, weaving a complex tapestry of loyalty and esoteric magic, eventually culminating in a revolutionary compromise that created the very same natural cycles by which we still measure our time to this day. It forces us to wonder what remains when everything we use to define our power and our identity is taken away, and what ultimate price must be paid to restore the balance. It is here, the shadows of this lightless underground kingdom, that we uncover one of the most intriguing stories known to Mesopotamian lore: Inanna's descent into the Netherworld. A deep weight rests within these texts, and it cannot be understated, because this is no mere myth of family rivalry or ancient folklore. It is a profound exploration of universal opposites, representing the remnants of a lost culture whose beliefs intertwine the intense radiance of spiritual power with the heavy stillness of cosmic balance. When we listen to the lost wisdom of these ancient verses, we aren't just reading a forgotten chronicle. We are witnessing an extraordinary spiritual transition during one of the earliest chapters in our collective history, when gods still roamed the earth. A moment where the boundaries of the cosmos itself are tested by a magnificent force of celestial ambition. Our tale brings us face to face with the 7 gates of the Underworld, where dark trials await anyone who dares to walk the path to the great below. The enigmatic laws of this hidden empire bow to no god, and every gate demands a heavy price, one which forces us to wonder about the hidden forces that govern our reality. What remains when everything we use to define ourselves, to establish any sense of order over the world we know, is suddenly taken away? And why would such a radiant goddess, one whose revered domain was firmly tethered to the highest heavens, intentionally cross the one dark threshold from which no traveler is ever allowed to return? What could possibly be worth surrendering her seat in the heavens, leaving behind her sprawling temples and sunlit courtyards, to confront the one power in the universe that refuses to bow to her command? But before taking those first fateful steps downward, we must first peer into the beautifully structured world she left behind. Dim oil lamps flicker softly along winding canals, casting long shadows that dance vividly against earth and clay walls as the daily bustle of civilization fades into stillness. The thick scent of blooming night flowers mingles with the grounding aroma of damp river silt, and all the while, hidden doors lie waiting within thick walls of those towering stepped ziggurats, where we find ourselves standing amidst the quiet mud-brick temples of Uruk, resting peacefully under a timeless canopy of stars. A soothing ambient temperature wraps this sleeping metropolis in an eternally protective embrace. If you are listening to this in the still quiet of the night, let us know where and when you are joining us from in the comments section. It is quietly comforting to realize that countless listeners, scattered across distant lands and different time zones, are all settling into the same quiet journey through the forgotten echoes of human history. And if you are enjoying this Sumerian history for sleep narrative, finding it helps you relax or even drift off, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps support our efforts to keep bringing you these ancient stories each week and continue reaching others who are searching for the same calm place to relax and unwind. If you would like uninterrupted sleep and longer versions, those are available to you through the Legends of the Dawn membership. Now we return to those weary occupants resting securely, completely unaware of the looming cosmic shift. A gentle breeze rustles through quiet palm orchards along those peaceful mud-brick walls of Uruk, while slow-moving stars turn patiently above their dreaming heads. Meanwhile, one of the brightest beacons among them is about to begin its long descent below the horizon, fading gracefully into the last glimmer of light, where the timeless secrets of the soul lie waiting in the darkness. High above this sleeping city shines the radiant star of both the morning and of the evening, the star Venus. This brilliant celestial ember was the living embodiment of the high goddess known as Inanna, or Ishtar to later generations. She was the goddess of love and war, of justice and power. The duality of her very nature was perfectly reflected in her sparkling form in the sky, which seemed to follow its own distinct path, disappearing for some periods and reappearing at others. She was the undisputed queen of heaven, a magnificent force of nature whose very essence pulsed with vibrant motion. This ambitious immortal constantly expanded her borders across the sunlit world, representing the bright and bustling life of early civilization. Her divine presence nurtured the blooming agricultural fields, bringing a strong energy to her beloved city. And in the evenings, her bright light spilled over the sprawling temple complex that had been dedicated to her name, known as Inanna. But even the most brilliant light casts a long shadow, drawing curious minds toward an uncharted darkness. Ancient clay tablets tell of a fateful moment when the goddess of the light turned her gaze away from those familiar stars, setting her heart upon the shadowy depths of the great below. A profound silence fell over the sacred courtyards of Uruk as she prepared to leave her comforting sanctuaries behind. Her motives for undertaking such a perilous descent remain beautifully shrouded in the mists of antiquity, where it is revealed that she sought to extend her vast terrestrial authority down into those quiet, dusty halls of the Underworld. This was no accidental wandering into forbidden territory. She chose this hidden road with dedicated certainty, fully aware of the heavy laws and inherent dangers governing that lightless empire. To cross such a boundary required immense provisions, demanding that she arm herself with the highest symbols of her authority. So before taking her first steps toward the shadows, she gathered the most potent objects of her power. These sacred tokens were physical manifestations of the Holy May itself, the divine wisdom woven into every single thread of existence. As such, every piece of her royal attire functioned as a protective talisman, connected deeply to the magic of creation. She began her ceremonial preparations by placing the magnificent crown of heaven upon her head. This towering headdress radiated a fierce and unquestionable sovereignty over the sprawling green plains of Mesopotamia. Its heavy weight served as a constant reminder of her exalted status among even the highest-ranking deities of the sky. Next, she draped a stunning lapis lazuli necklace across her collarbone, its deep blue stones perfectly mirroring the celestial vault. Those precious gems held a shimmering, starlight quality that enhanced her breathtaking beauty. Soft reflections from the flickering temple lamps danced across the polished stones, projecting an aura of pure grace. Meanwhile, two delicate, egg-shaped beads were then fastened carefully to the adornments upon her chest. These specific treasures symbolized her nurturing vitality, representing the driving force of life that she brought to the earthly garden. And to shield her heart from unseen dangers, she secured a gleaming golden breastplate around her torso. Its smooth metallic surface provided a divine barrier, offering comfort against the creeping chill of the dark earth. It pulsed with a warm, organic rhythm that contrasted sharply with the cold stillness of her intended destination. This protective armor signified her absolute readiness to face whatever trials waited patiently in the depths below. Slipping a heavy gold ring onto her finger, she anchored her revered identity as a supreme ruler of the living. She then took up her lapis lazuli measuring rod, holding its accompanying line firmly in her grasp. These specific tools established the rigid borders of human civilization, representing her absolute command over an organized administration of our terrestrial planes. Finally, she wrapped herself in a majestic royal robe, completing her breathtaking transformation into a fully armored goddess. Every single object she wore was a carefully chosen symbol, written flawlessly in the language of upper-world powers. She stood as a dazzling beacon of earthly vitality, radiating her profound light against the gathering dusk. Yet despite her careful planning, the wise goddess understood the unprecedented risks of entering a realm that bowed to no one. The great below was an inescapable domain, functioning on rules that even the most powerful deities could not simply overwrite. She knew she must leave a tether to the surface, a clever contingency plan to ensure her safe return. Within the quiet shadows of her temple, she summoned her most loyal vizier, a dedicated servant known as Ninshubur. This faithful companion had stood by her side through countless ages, offering unwavering support and absolute devotion. Inanna spoke softly, entrusting her closest ally with a set of highly specific instructions if events took a turn for the worst. She ordered her vizier to wait patiently for 3 days, watching the horizon for any sign of her ascent. If the appointed time passed with no return, Ninshubur was to immediately sound an alarm across the celestial courts. The loyal servant must dress in torn garments of mourning, beating the drums of grief outside the sacred assembly halls. With her contingency plan securely in place, the radiant goddess turned her back on the comforting glow of her home. She walked slowly away from the bustling canals of Uruk, stepping out into the vast, empty expanse of the open desert. The familiar sounds of civilization faded entirely, replaced by a strange sort of silence that echoed across the barren plains. Every graceful stride carried her further away from the predictable rhythms of agricultural life on the sunlit surface. A cool wind swept down from the northern mountains, stirring the loose sand into drifting, ghostly shapes along her path. She marched deliberately toward the hidden threshold of reality, a shadowy palace marking the entrance to the Underworld. As her silent footsteps drew her further away from the comforting warmth of her rightful domain, the heat of the desert slowly gave way to a cool shadow, where Inanna soon found herself standing before the imposing mud-brick walls of a place known as Ganzir, the ultimate threshold between our waking earth and the primordial abyss. This grand palace marked the absolute edge of mortal awareness, a towering structure completely insulated from the constant motion of living beings. Its heavy stone corridors swallowed the last lingering rays of twilight, wrapping her descending form in a thick blanket of darkness. Here, the ambient air grew perfectly still, carrying a faint scent of dry dust, mingling with the mineral-rich fragrance of buried clay. She walked deliberately toward a set of massive sealed wooden doors, sensing the immense crushing weight of the earth resting peacefully above her. Waiting patiently within this lightless entryway stood a chief gatekeeper of the lower realms, a solemn figure known to ancient scribes as Neti. History has often painted such guardians as terrifying monsters, yet early clay tablets describe a dignified administrator, tasked strictly with maintaining a flawless universal balance. His imposing silhouette projected an uncompromising reverence for the same ancient laws he was sworn to uphold, standing firmly as an unbreakable pillar of cosmic order. The heavenly goddess spoke softly into that cavernous silence, demanding immediate passage into his hidden empire of dust and lost souls. She announced her royal titles with a resounding confidence, expecting those heavy wooden doors to swing wide open at the mere mention of her celestial authority. Yet Neti listened to her commanding voice with patience, refusing to be swayed by such a dazzling display of upper-world sovereignty. This dignified keeper of boundaries understood that those shadowed halls would submit to absolutely no one, regardless of their magnificent status in high heavens above. He respectfully halted her progress, explaining that he must first consult with the supreme ruler of this dark domain before any traveler could enter. The loyal gatekeeper turned his back, the threshold still sealed behind him, disappearing into the deepest reaches of the underground palace to deliver the queen's unexpected request. Deep within the beating heart of this lightless domain rested a silent throne room belonging to Ereshkigal, the solemn judge of all departed souls. She served as a necessary cosmic opposite to her radiant sister, Inanna, embodying the very essence of stillness that eventually claims all earthly vitality. Early Mesopotamian traditions never described her as being inherently wicked, as one might expect, but rather as a profoundly burdened caretaker, tasked primarily with managing the eternal rest of countless souls and maintaining the silent order of all creation. While her vibrant counterpart nurtured the blooming agricultural fields on the surface, the queen of the underworld tended to the afterlife of all mortal souls below. Ereshkigal listened carefully as her chief gatekeeper announced the arrival of her ambitious sibling, feeling a deep, unsettling tension ripple throughout her quiet halls at the news. Bringing such a blinding, restless energy into a sanctuary of endings could dangerously threaten the fragile equilibrium governing her silent domain. The Underworld Queen pondered this unprecedented intrusion, weighing the heavy consequences of allowing her sister to breach the strict boundaries between them. She eventually granted permission for those heavy doors to be opened, but this rare rite of passage came with a highly strict and entirely non-negotiable condition. A condition that would force the Goddess of Light to undertake an incredibly dark voyage to reach the dusky throne rooms waiting just below. Her radiant sister would only be allowed to enter if she submitted entirely to ancient, undeniable laws governing 7 descending gates. Neti returned to his post, carrying the solemn decree of his powerful mistress back to the celestial goddess waiting by its entrance. Slowly, he unfastened the heavy wooden bolts securing that first massive door, revealing a descending lightless corridor stretching endlessly into the depths of the earth. A cool, stagnant breeze swept upward from the open threshold. Glowing softly in her divine armor, the goddess of the morning star stepped eagerly toward the first boundary, initiating her ritualistic progression. But just as she was about to cross this initial threshold, the chief gatekeeper reached out with a gentle yet firm determination. He respectfully demanded that she surrender her most prominent symbol of authority, asking her to remove the exalted crown from her head. This magnificent headdress had represented her unquestionable sovereignty over the sprawling green valleys of our terrestrial Earth for what seemed like forever. Handing it over meant willingly shedding her recognized status as an untouchable supreme ruler among the highest ranks of immortal deities. Nonetheless, the Kur bows to no one, and so the heavy golden symbol was taken slowly from her brow, dimming her brilliant aura just a fraction as it disappeared into the gathering shadows. Stripped of her grandest ornament, a sudden wave of concern washed over the once untouchable queen. She looked toward the guardian of the gates with a profound sense of confusion, asking why her sacred talisman of power was being confiscated. Her voice carried a faint tremor of uncertainty, echoing softly against the smooth stone walls of the corridor. Neti did not provide an explanation out of ill intent. He simply spoke in a hypnotic mantra, one simple passage that served as the foundational bedrock for the entire Underworld kingdom. His voice came in a soft but firm whisper. The ways of the Underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned. These chillingly calm words established an undeniable truth, one that no amount of divine magic could ever overwrite without shattering all of reality itself. The lightless domain below did not recognize any earthly symbols of power, and it cared little for the shining accomplishments achieved in the warm sunlight above. And little did she yet know that this was just the first step to come. Without her towering symbol of authority, Inanna appeared noticeably smaller against the overwhelming scale of this deep rocky architecture. She took a slow, steadying breath, preparing her spirit for the long descent awaiting her in the lightless caverns ahead. That heavy wooden door of the first threshold slammed shut behind her, echoing with a terrifying finality that urged her onward. With a single silent tick, It had locked away any lingering trace of the bright world above. She found herself standing alone within a narrow descending corridor, carved entirely from smooth cold stone. Stagnant air drifted slowly upward from the hidden depths, wrapping around her fading silhouette like a chilling embrace. Every deliberate footstep echoed softly against bare rock, producing a steady rhythm as she journeyed deeper. The radiant glow normally surrounding her celestial form began to struggle against the crushing weight of these subterranean shadows. The isolated path upon which she walked demanded the absolute submission of her strong spirit. Soon, this winding passage opened into another vast open chamber, where she found the second towering gate of the great below. Its massive cedar timbers formed a formidable threshold, bound tightly together by thick bands of tarnished copper that had long since surrendered their earthly shine to an eternal coating of dust. Its imposing frame was secured by heavy locking bars carved into the shapes of fearsome lions, the silent guardians of a lonely crossroad. This ancient wood absorbed all remaining traces of warmth from its surroundings, standing as a monolithic barrier between the wandering queen and the deeper shadows waiting patiently just beyond its reach. Here, the dignified gatekeeper waited patiently before its sealed entrance, ready to enforce the ancient laws and strict parameters of this dusty domain. Glowing softly in the gathering gloom, Queen Inanna approached this next uncompromising barrier with a hesitance. Nettie reached forward once again, this time to demand the surrender of her shimmering lapis lazuli necklace. This breathtaking adornment had long rested across her collarbone, to symbolize her unbreakable connection with the boundless starry heavens. Those deep blue stones held the very essence of the vibrant night sky, projecting an aura of pure celestial beauty across the world. Handing over such a precious artifact physically severed her ties to the upper atmosphere. Those polished gems vanished into complete darkness, instantly dimming the radiant light that had always accompanied her presence. Once again, the goddess felt a profound wave of vulnerability wash over her shivering form. And once again she questioned Nettie about this rite of passage, seeking to better understand the harsh rituals of his quiet realm. But the faithful gatekeeper simply repeated his hypnotic warning, saying nothing less and nothing more. The second gate opened slowly before her. Dark corridors plunged even further into a realm that grew increasingly devoid of color or warmth. But there was no turning back. The once vibrant deity had no choice but to continue through this suffocating atmosphere, where the energy of life held absolutely no sway. The sheer weight of the silence pressed tightly against her ears as she eventually arrived before the next imposing threshold. This tremendous wooden door stood as another rigid checkpoint in her relentless descent toward the throne room of Ereshkigal. At the third gate, the steadfast guardian instructed his royal guest to remove the twin egg-shaped beads from the adornments resting upon her chest. These delicate treasures represented her nurturing fertility, a physical manifestation of her divine life force. In the sunlit world above, those beautiful beads pulsed with a warm and organic rhythm that encouraged the blooming of agricultural fields. But such a fierce earthly energy had absolutely no place nor purpose within the barren dust of the underworld. Bereft of her nurturing symbols, the Queen of Heaven stood as a shadow of her former glory before the third gate, which now swung open on quiet hinges, inviting her to continue her daring adventure away from everything she had ever known. Every cautious step carried her bravely onward through dark, winding passages, her spirit humbled by the crushing architecture of deep earth. The ambient temperatures plummeted drastically as she approached the fourth imposing threshold. Nettie stood there yet again, firmly blocking her path, raising his hands to request the removal of her golden breastplate. This gleaming metallic armor had provided a divine barrier against the creeping dangers of the unknown. Its polished surface was a glorious royal display of her absolute readiness to face any trial or conflict. With its surrender, she relinquished the last remaining layer of her physical defense. The protective golden plate dissolved into the shadows, leaving her exposed to the eternal chill of those cool stone walls. And as the cold set in, those heavy wooden doors parted to reveal a corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly into our planet's deepest roots. With every passing moment within the deepening gloom, the fond memories of her sunlit temples began to feel like a distant dream. Those heavy earthen walls pressed inward, reminding our descending queen of her total isolation from the bustling cities she once nurtured. The slow, repetitive dripping of subterranean water was the only measure left to mark the slow passage of time in a world that otherwise remained completely frozen. Mortal minds are invited to ponder the breathtaking metaphor hidden within this slow shedding of immortal pride. We see an ambitious deity forced to expose the raw essence of her spirit. It is a mesmerizing countdown to a complete loss of worldly identity, proving that even the most powerful creators must eventually submit to the greater workings of the universe. Our resilient ancestors recorded this journey not as a tragic defeat, but as a profound and vital exploration of cosmic balance. They recognized that the heavy laws of this hidden empire were designed to maintain an unbroken harmony throughout all of reality. Every confiscated artifact represented a necessary sacrifice to preserve that fragile equilibrium governing living populations alongside the departed souls of their ancestors. As that fourth door closed with a deafening thud, the surrounding darkness grew thick enough to feel tangible against her bare skin, but her fateful descent was still only half complete. She would need to be prepared for a much deeper unraveling of her celestial power in the shadows waiting patiently below, where her solitary footsteps carried her bravely toward an even greater surrender of all civilized order, as she knew it. Deep within this sunken labyrinth rested a silence heavier than any stone. Dense earthen walls pressed closely around her fading form. A stagnant chill lingered like a living presence in its ancient halls, where thick layers of dust coated every smooth surface along her path. Soon a fifth imposing barrier emerged from the gloom. Its enormous beam stood firmly across the narrow passage, and as always, Nettie waited patiently beside its sealed entrance. He raised his hand, demanding yet another piece of her worldly identity. The goddess was instructed to remove the precious gold ring from her finger, the ultimate seal of her social authority. It represented every binding oath she had sworn among the living. To wear this golden band meant holding a recognized name across the sweeping Mesopotamian plains. Nonetheless, the price must be paid. She slipped it slowly from her hand, watching cautiously as the gleaming metal was quickly swallowed by the swirling dust and inky shadows of the underworld. Taking away this jewelry stripped her entirely of her recognized terrestrial office. Without her royal seal, the radiant queen became just another nameless wanderer, navigating an endless night. The heavy wooden door slowly creaked open, and the once powerful Queen of Heaven ventured further onward into the void, the weight of its stillness wrapped tightly around her shivering shoulders. The familiar sounds of bustling markets had long since faded from memory. She was becoming a silent participant in an ancient cosmic ritual, one which went back to the very beginning of all things. Every gentle stride pulled her deeper into an uncompromising domain within the very bedrock of the world. It was a mesmerizing progression toward complete vulnerability. Another grand open chamber eventually appeared in the murky distance of these narrowing corridors. Here, the sixth towering gate required an absolute surrender of her most vital administrative tools. Nettie respectfully demanded the lapis lazuli measuring rod and its accompanying line. These specific items were profound symbols of early civilization itself. Earthly rulers had utilized such tools to establish rigid borders. They were essential for designing towering mud brick temples or digging sweeping canals. Giving them up meant relinquishing her command over the mechanics of architecture and engineering. The mortal world was built entirely upon carefully calculated measurements that they relied heavily upon to cultivate the wild plains. But an ambitious desire to organize reality holds absolutely no power within the great below. This silent kingdom cannot be surveyed by instruments belonging to the living. Ancient boundaries established by a lapis lazuli rod would dissolve instantly within this lightless void. Its endless dusty expanse defies all attempts to map its quiet corridors. Our beautiful goddess solemnly surrendered her sacred blue rod to the shadows, placing it, along with her coiled line, gently into the waiting hands of the gatekeeper. It was a breathless moment representing the total collapse of her civilized order. Those polished administrative tools vanished quickly into the surrounding gloom, and with them she watched a vital piece of the holy May slip away from her grasp. Her deep connection to the very structure of her beloved Uruk had been removed. Deprived of these administrative artifacts, her capacity to govern an organized metropolis evaporated entirely. But it was far too late to turn back. Pushing on, she walked bravely past the massive wooden frame of the sixth threshold. A profound realization begins to echo through the silence during the final hours of her lonely trek. An ancient understanding that traces back to the very dawn of history, long before the gods themselves first walked our rolling plains. Those heavenly decrees of the holy May were being methodically stripped away, but this was never intended as a petty punishment or insult. To enter the realm of permanent silence, every remnant of the heavens must be entirely erased. Each piece of sacred attire left behind represented a shedding of cosmic identity, where the radiant power of the upper world is systematically undone, leaving only the foundational energy of one's existence. Not an ego propped up by glorious conquests and shiny material possessions, but the very essential fabric of their spirit, their true nature. It was a necessary cosmic translation, required by a system that embodied both the beginning and end of all things. The great below possesses no use for the symbolic authority of the stars, or the politicized glory of kings. It matters not what royal seal you once carried, for this dusty sanctuary cares little for what great city once sang your name. Every single soul, mortal and immortal alike, must arrive bare before their final judgment. Worldly titles mean nothing to a kingdom built upon eternal rest. And even the strongest walls and borders dissolve into the ether when faced with the infinite scale of the abyss. Such an immense loss of identity humbles even the most prideful deities of the Anunnaki pantheon, and this story reflects that better than most. In Inanna's journey, we witness a vibrant goddess forced to abandon all connection to her sunlit realm, shedding every layer of her celestial power, leaving only the raw essence beneath. And interestingly enough, here we find a small piece of the wisdom contained in these forgotten mythologies. Because her fading splendor was even more than just a necessary toll to transcend into the realm of the dead. It also mirrors the temporary nature of all earthly creation. Even the grandest walls of a sprawling metropolis and the loudest bustling markets contained within must eventually crumble back into raw river clay from which they were formed. The silent foundations of primordial law waits patiently to reclaim every spark of vital energy in its due time. High on the surface, mortal caretakers continue their daily labor, completely unaware of this profound trial. They stack heavy bricks to build massive temples dedicated to the supreme authority of their divine rulers. And all the while, deep below them, that same celestial sovereignty quietly bows her head to the absolute power of the Netherworld, a domain that treats all wandering travelers with equal indifference. The radiant queen moved steadily through the gloom while trying to comprehend the underlying truths of this difficult lesson. Step by graceful step, she floated like a tiny ember through a vast network of subterranean caverns. The faint fluctuation of cool air brushed gently against her bare arms with every careful stride. Those winding pathways grew increasingly narrow as she neared the central heart of Ker. The crushing weight of our entire world settled firmly upon her shoulders. Every shadow seemed to stretch lazily across the bare rock, pulling her further downward. She surrendered her tired muscles to the heavy draw of its gravity, as her spirit was slowly recalibrated to match the subtle frequencies of the deep. Only one final piece of her worldly power remained intact, the majestic royal robe of ladyship, which clung softly to her skin. It was the last lingering tether connecting her to the vibrant empires of the living. She gathered her remaining courage to face the ultimate trial waiting ahead of her. The last and final murky threshold loomed quietly in the distance. Here, the heavy doors of the seventh gate guarded the silent throne room of the Underworld Queen. Nettie stood perfectly still before the massive cedar timbers of this ultimate entryway to the deeply buried domain of the Netherworld. The gatekeeper raised his hand one more time to demand her very last earthly tether, the majestic royal robe of ladyship known as a pala garment. Such breathtaking fabric had served as the grand symbol of her celestial identity and status. Its finely woven threads carried the familiar scent of blooming orchards from the gardens of the upper sanctuaries. Submitting to his demand meant completely relinquishing her final protective layer of worldly comfort. But the price of her entrance would demand nothing less, and so she allowed this heavy velvet cloth to slip gracefully from her weary shoulders, leaving her completely stripped of any worldly tether or celestial symbol of power. 7 times she had stood before those towering gates, slowly giving up every lingering connection to the realm she knew, and all 7 times she would question the reasoning behind it. Now, standing bare before the final entrance to a place of no return, Inanna posed that question once more, and one last time the gatekeeper replied with the same calm and undeniable answer. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned. His steady voice came in a hushed whisper, and perhaps, this time, it was more than just the repetition of a ritualistic mantra. It was a warning, one last, final omen of what was to come, if the ways of their domain were not abided by. Heavy wooden doors groaned open to reveal an awe-inspiring sanctuary buried within the ancient bedrock. She stepped bravely across this absolute boundary into a domain of profound silence. That final massive doorway slammed shut behind her, echoing with a terrifying finality. Narrow earthen corridors suddenly gave way to a breathtaking display of dark, shimmering stone. Ancient clay texts described this hidden palace as a massive structure carved entirely from pure lapis lazuli. Polished blue walls caught the faint, ethereal light to create a barely perceptible contrast against the heavy dust. Here, The cool air carried no trace of the fresh scent of damp river silt. It smelled of age, and not just the kind of muskiness that permeates old cellars. It was the kind of scent that spoke of the most primordial days of the earth, long before the very first breath of life was ushered into the light. It smelled of ancient crushed minerals and decaying matter that had long since dissolved into the very dust that permeated the rest of the realm, where it lay trapped forever in a timeless vault far below the surface of the earth. Its massive architecture absorbed every faint sound, amplifying her profound isolation. Stepping into her sister's palace felt like walking across a frozen midnight sky. Dark blue stone surfaces projected a haunting celestial beauty that rivaled her own. It was a sprawling monument dedicated to eternal rest. At the far end of this vast chamber, Ereshkigal sat solemnly upon her ancient throne. She projected an imposing majesty that perfectly mirrored the crushing stillness of her lightless empire. This quiet ruler of departed souls watched her vulnerable sister approach with unwavering focus. The contrast between these two cosmic forces became strikingly apparent in that dim room. Our once radiant Queen of Heaven now stood entirely divested of her earthly splendor, facing her dark counterpart, who embodied an inescapable destination for all living things. But despite shedding every layer of her divine armor, a restless ambition still flickered within Inanna's spirit. Her conquering nature could not easily surrender even to the formidable forces of the deep. She looked upon that lapis lazuli throne with a sudden, overwhelming desire. Taking a bold step forward, the radiant goddess would commit a fatal transgression against the cosmic balance. She intended to overthrow her sister, seeking to claim this dark dominion for herself. It was a fierce display of immortal ego that directly challenged the unbreakable foundation of reality itself. For as she had been warned many times, the Underworld laws were designed to function exactly as intended. It was an undeniable truth, protecting their fragile equilibrium from such reckless intrusion. Ereshkigal rose from her seat with a sudden, terrifying authority to defend her quiet realm. And so she would. Inanna's attempt would be quickly subdued. The gradual stripping of her celestial authority had left her far too vulnerable. While she lay defeated on the palace floor, the 7 Anunnaki judges of the Netherworld materialized slowly from the surrounding shadows. They represented the strict laws of a justice that bows to no mortal or celestial sovereign. These dreaded arbiters of fate assembled silently around their bold intruder, decreeing a heavy cry of guilt that boomed across those polished blue walls. Together, they would deliver the ultimate penalty for her transgression. Not out of malice or cruel intent. They acted merely as a flawless force of balance, designed to neutralize any threat to the universal design. Standing shoulder to shoulder, they focused their collective power upon the fading Queen of Heaven. Those mysterious judges gathered closely together, where it is said that they cast the eyes of death upon her, and in that moment a crushing gaze of absolute stillness washed completely over her bare form. The power that had once fueled her was immediately extinguished under their dark scrutiny, all within the span of a single breathless moment. Solemn eyes watched as her life force surrendered completely to silence. In accordance with the strict, undeniable laws of the realm, her radiant energy was transformed into a motionless, sleeping form held suspended upon those ancient walls of the Underworld kingdom. There she would remain in a deep slumber, held fast by the quiet currents of antiquity. The reigning goddess of vibrant cities had been conquered by the infinite scale of the abyss. This dark underground sanctuary reclaimed its peaceful order, swallowing her fading light without a single trace. Yet even in the dust and darkness we find a spark of hope. They may not have known it at the time, but her breathtaking journey into the world of shadows was actually far from over. Because although she had been taken by the deep, her clever contingency plan remained perfectly intact. One last fragile thread had been carefully tied to the world above, a plan that had been laid out before she had even taken her first step. Her loyal vizier, Ninshubur, still waited patiently under the starry skies above the mud-brick temples of Uruk, faithfully watching the flat eastern horizon for any sign of her beloved queen. Refreshing night breezes swept softly across those quiet canals, rustling through swaying palm orchards. The steady rhythm of mortal life continued its patient hum just above the hidden conflict, while Ninshubur kept a lonely vigil. When 3 days had passed with no return, she prepared to set this miracle into motion. She would soon travel to petition some of the most powerful gods of the Anunnaki pantheon for aid. Gods who possessed enough esoteric magic to orchestrate such an unprecedented rescue from a place of no return. And in the meantime we may rest assured that this beloved goddess of love and light will always return to our moonlit horizons, just as she has for countless millennia before. Her luminous embodiment as the evening star of Venus has been thought to reflect her descent into the underworld for countless generations of curious mortal minds. Minds who gazed up into the night sky during the earliest dawn of human civilization, wondering why her bright light seems to follow such an irregular path. And no matter the phase of her cycle, she maintains a patient eternal vigil across the sparkling tapestry of the heavens. She will rise again from those quiet roots of creation as the morning star, to nurture the sprawling agricultural fields of the surface once more. But for now, a heavy and comforting stillness blankets her bright spirit within the protective sanctuary of the deep earth. This peaceful pause safely cradles the entire landscape, allowing the final echoes of her cosmic journey to dissolve softly into a beautiful tide of restful dreams. Slow-moving stars turn patiently above the majestic mud-brick temples of ancient Uruk, bringing faint light to the grand architecture of this sleeping metropolis. As the quiet hours of the night deepen, the silver light of the heavens brushes softly across the peaceful canals, wrapping every courtyard in a protective embrace of complete tranquility. This serene atmosphere invites every element of the natural world to surrender to the comforting quiet of the Mesopotamian night. Cradled forever by the compassionate magic of early creation, the ancient landscape rests in perfect alignment with the celestial order. The world breathes softly in absolute harmony. The vast expanse of 1,000 twinkling lights travels endlessly along the gentle celestial seas of the night sky. This brilliant display overhead serves as a timeless analogy for the continuous folds of deep history. Like those steady stars tracing their familiar paths across the heavens, the memories of the past move along a calm and predictable current. Humanity floats endlessly along the shifting currents of antiquity, guided safely by the enduring legacy of those who came before. Every soul remains suspended safely within the long shadows of the ancient world, resting securely under the watchful gaze of the cosmos, connecting the earliest ages of mankind to the world we now inhabit, maintaining a beautiful and unbroken chain of existence. We are all a part of this magnificent history, woven deeply into the very fabric of an everlasting story that spans countless generations. Our footsteps fall upon the very same soil which has cradled the towering monuments of countless golden empires, where the quiet rooms of the ancient library houses used to rest in total serenity. Delicate marks of cuneiform script hold their timeless wisdom in an environment of undisturbed peace. This profound stillness wraps the sacred sanctuaries in a comforting mantle of protection, preserving the timeless magic of a bygone era. The quiet progression of our collective memories remains entirely secure, offering a comforting reassurance that our origins are preserved within hardened artifacts, made from the earth itself. Our eyes are illuminated by the exact same light that once guided the ancient stargazers of early Sumeria. The identical constellations that once sparkled above the first courts of the primeval kings continue to trace their patient patterns across the midnight sky, reminding the mortal spirit of an enduring permanence and anchoring our consciousness to a sense of timeless wonder. The continual nature of deep history provides a profound sense of security that warms the quiet evening. There is a beautiful certainty in the knowledge that the rhythms of creation will always remain constant. Calm winds sweep across the wide plains, whispering the ancient secrets of the soul to those willing to listen. The fragrant perfume of desert flowers mingles perfectly with the grounding aroma of the rich river silt, soothing every wandering thought. The entire landscape surrenders to a state of suspended tranquility, floating effortlessly upon a slow tide of absolute peace. The roots of early creation reach deep into the rich soil to anchor the world in a restorative period of rest. This quiet sanctuary under the stars offers a comforting shelter, a place where the mind can fully surrender to the calm of night. Every slow breath aligns beautifully with the peaceful cadence of a landscape that is safely asleep within the distant memory of antiquity, enveloped completely by the everlasting harmony of our origins. Yet as the deep folds of night hold the vast Mesopotamian plains in a calm embrace, the silence carries a subtle shifting wind. Because beneath this blanket of absolute tranquility, an unseen current began to ripple through the cosmic architecture, hinting that the heavy weight of the Netherworld is not the final chapter of her tale. The eternal balance of reality dictates that every action must eventually answer to a higher law, whispering that even the deepest slumber is merely the prelude to a new dawn. While the patient constellations continue their endless rotation, guiding the imagination toward the edge of an unraveling mystery that waits just beyond the veil of night, a fragile thread of devotion remains tightly tethered to the surface world, anchoring the stilled spirit of the fallen goddess to the faithful vigil of those who keep watch under the stars. This enduring connection turns our gaze back toward the impossible nature of this ancient mystery, clearing a path to confront the impossible and inviting us to consider the true boundaries of mortal and immortal existence. What ultimate price must be paid to reverse an irreversible fate? Within the dusty libraries of ancient Sumeria, mysterious Sumerian tablets detailing the myth of Inanna's descent offer a profound glimpse into a cosmic journey that defied all known boundaries of reality. Here, the radiant Queen of Heaven, one of the most powerful gods of the Anunnaki Council, had willingly surrendered every worldly symbol of her celestial power to face the absolute stillness of the great below. She stepped bravely through 7 towering gates, leaving the comforting light of familiar stars entirely behind her. Those heavy wooden doors sealed her within a dusty empire that cared nothing for divine displays of supremacy. But perhaps the most staggering mystery hidden within this Mesopotamian legend is not how she entered those shadows, but how she managed to come back from a realm of no return. This daring goddess had ventured too far by attempting to claim a throne that was not her own, and for her transgression, the solemn judges of the Underworld had delivered their sentence, halting her vibrant motion permanently. She was left suspended in a deep slumber upon the ancient lapis lazuli surfaces of those dark palace walls. The Underworld kingdom of Ker was built upon an unbreakable foundation of laws, forming boundaries which were not to be crossed. This quiet domain belonged exclusively to her dark sister, Ereshkigal, whose authority bowed to absolutely no one, and under her fierce gaze in the land of dust, both mortal kings, immortal gods, priests, and even common criminals alike were all subject to the same treatment. To escape such heavy gravity would require far more than sheer brute force or dizzying displays of celestial power. The ancient rules governing that lightless realm were flawlessly designed to protect the fragile system of universal equilibrium. Bending these strict parameters meant navigating a complex web of deeply esoteric conditions. The conditions of an order that had already been established long before the first Anunnaki gods were formed from the primordial ether of the ancient abyss. These deeply hidden mechanics protected the entire world from falling to chaos. Only those who possessed knowledge of the highest esoteric magic could ever hope to even comprehend such intricate mechanisms. Every living soul was bound tightly to this undeniable cosmic architecture, whether from the heavens above or the earth below. If it could be done at all, pulling the goddess out of her deep trance would require a profound understanding of this natural balance and a willingness to pay the ultimate price. Her last chance to return lay in a clever contingency plan that was left in place before she had ever even taken her first step through the entrance to the Netherworld, in the city of Ganzir. It lingered in the air like a tiny thread of hope, connecting her now dormant spirit to the vibrant world of living populations above, where an unprecedented rescue mission would soon rely upon the making of strange new entities, beings who were capable of crossing the boundaries between worlds. Yet even so, a chilling hidden law still waited patiently in the depths, and it was not to be trifled with. This strict cosmic decree demanded a harsh price for any soul who dared to leave the shadows, a price far heavier than she had already paid at the 7 gates during her descent. And as a result, her eventual return as the morning star became much more than a mere tale of rescue. It marked the profound birth of a mesmerizing seasonal pattern, one that still dictates our world to this day, an eternal cycle of rest and renewal. As we trace the wandering path of this forgotten time in antiquity, a time when gods still roamed the earth, we witness a breathtaking journey that perfectly illustrates this delicate cosmic harmony. But to fully understand it, we must gently draw our gaze toward the eastern horizon of ancient Sumeria, where a warm night breeze rustles softly through the quiet palm orchards of Uruk. Dim oil lamps flicker gently along smooth clay walls, casting long dancing shadows across the winding canals nearby. The sprawling metropolis rests securely under a dark canopy of slowly turning constellations. In the peace of night, the familiar sounds of bustling markets fade into a deeply restorative silence. Thousands of ambitious workers slumber peacefully within their woven reed homes, while the vast celestial vault rotates with a flawlessly calculated precision, charting the quiet passage of every long hour. Glittering embers of starlight reflect beautifully across the calm waters of the Euphrates River. This pristine earthly garden breathes softly in harmony with the heavens above. The steady rhythm of life continues its patient hum just above the hidden depths of the underworld. But a vital piece of this beautiful picture was still missing from the sky. Their beloved goddesses, radiant light as the evening star, Venus, remains trapped within an inescapable domain of dust. If you are listening to this in the still quiet of the night, let us know where and when you are joining us from in the comments section. it is quietly comforting to realize that countless listeners, scattered across distant lands and different time zones, are all settling into the same quiet journey through the forgotten echoes of human history. And if you are enjoying this Sumerian history for sleep narrative, finding it helps you relax, or even drift off, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps support our efforts to keep bringing you these ancient stories each week, and continue reaching others who are searching for the same calm place to relax and unwind. If you would like uninterrupted sleep and longer versions, those are available to you through the Legends of the Dawn membership. Now we return to a time thousands of years in the past, when early stargazers looked up into that vast expanse of the sky with solemn curiosity, wondering where the guiding light of their revered goddess had gone. The absence of her brilliant energy had left a subtle void in the turning heavens, and the entire world felt the weight of her loss. Only a dedicated few would truly come to understand the staggering sacrifice that was about to take place below their feet, because one devoted figure remains awake in the cooling shadows of their most sacred temple courtyard. Her loyal vizier, Ninshubur, waits anxiously beside a polished stone altar, keeping silent vigil while the cosmos slowly rotates in an endless celestial sea. Her faithful companionship represented the purest form of devotion, the kind of dedication that transcends the boundaries of ordinary time. She knows the strict instructions left behind by her sovereign before embarking on her perilous journey, but she had also hoped she would not need to rely on them. A heavy sense of unease began to ripple through the quiet atmosphere of the sleeping city. In those shaded temple walls, the deep fragrance of sweet river silt mingles with the lingering aroma of burning cedar resin, anchoring her restless mind to the physical reality of the darkening world around her. She takes a slow, steadying breath to prepare her spirit for whatever comes next, and with her, the entire landscape seems to pause in a state of suspended anticipation. Her tired eyes stay firmly fixed upon the flat, eastern horizon, where she watches patiently for a radiant light that is now desperately overdue. 3 incredibly long days drifted slowly past those silent canals of ancient Uruk, and 3 cold nights had brought absolutely no sign of the goddess's return. A heavy realization settled deeply into her weary spirit. The allotted time her master had planned for this perilous journey into the deepest realms of the earth had expired. An overwhelming shadow of loss began to envelop her heart. Ninshubur knew with absolute certainty that this meant her beloved sovereign still remained trapped in the underworld below. And so, this faithful divine vizier prepared to set their desperate contingency plan into motion. She stood bravely within the shadowed temple walls to fulfill her final sacred duty. In a solemn ritual observed by all immortal customs, she tore her elegant clothing into ragged strips, symbolizing profound cosmic sorrow. Her shivering form was dressed in ruined garments of mourning to reflect her deep internal pain. And when she was ready, her bare hands reached slowly for a heavy wooden drum resting quietly nearby, the drum of grief. Striking its tightly stretched leather produced a resonant, booming sound across those quiet plains, producing a mournful rhythm meant to shatter an eerie stillness of midnight. These solemn echoes rolled rapidly upward toward the grand assembly halls of the Anunnaki. Her calls of despair echoed throughout their luminous shrines, where this loyal servant carried her urgent plea directly to the highest immortal authorities. She traveled first to a magnificent storm god known as Enlil, the god of air, wind, and the great storms which swept across the entire planet. It was he who had ushered in the first breath, creating the very atmosphere of the earth. In the Anunnaki pantheon, his powers were second only to his primordial and now dormant father, Anu, the king of all gods. And in the absence of his father's active guidance, he himself essentially fulfilled the same powerful role, serving as the highest authority among their council. He presided over a sprawling mud-brick sanctuary located in the city of Nippur. Approaching his high throne required immense courage from this simple earthly attendant. Ninshubur fell to her knees before him, begging for an immediate intervention. Tears streamed down her face while she described the trapped goddess. Enlil listened patiently, yet his ancient face remained completely rigid through her plight. He looked down upon her mourning figure with a sense of detachment, and perhaps it was the kind of detachment which was unavoidable for such a deeply powerful ruler, one who had reigned over the earth since its earliest formative days, who had had thousands of millennia to fully understand the intricate workings of reality. Disrupting the delicate balance between life and death was simply forbidden by ancient decrees, and so the storm god felt he must maintain his absolute position on universal order, without hesitation. He refused to extend his powerful hand into the dusty empire of the Netherworld. He operated entirely upon a strict adherence to universal cosmic law, the very laws that govern all creation. The boundaries separating the two realms were absolutely uncompromising. The high god reasoned the Queen of Heaven had willingly chosen her path, seeking to obtain the dark secrets of the abyssal realm, the one domain her luminous light could not touch. She had ventured eagerly into the land of no return, to pursue her own bold ambitions, and for such reckless transgressions she must pay the ultimate price required to maintain the delicate equilibrium. Enlil then slowly repeated that same ominous warning that she herself had been issued at each of the 7 gates during her descent. The ways of the Underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned. His strict devotion to this cosmic order forced the Queen's vizier to seek aid elsewhere. Wiping her tired eyes, she turned away from his high terrace in defeat. Her solitary footsteps carried her rapidly toward another towering temple platform of the heavens. Here resided Inanna's own father, the glowing moon deity named Nanna. He rested peacefully within his own grand sanctuary, radiating a soothing silver aura across his quiet halls. Ninshubur entered his pristine courts with a trembling voice, echoing in the dark. Again she pleaded passionately, hoping he would rescue his trapped celestial daughter from her dusty prison. Her rhythmic drumming of grief bounced softly against the polished stone walls, and Nanna felt a deep sadness rippling through his immortal spirit. But even this compassionate moon god could not override the fundamental rules of existence. He repeated that exact same rigid philosophy. Intervening in the realm of departed souls would severely disrupt all natural harmony. This luminous lord of the night refused to challenge the solemn laws of the Underworld. Allowing a prisoner of the earth to simply walk free would shatter the very foundations of reality. He reminded her that the abyss demands strict obedience from all wandering travelers, and the unbending rules of creation were far more important than any one single life, no matter how precious. With 2 powerful elders refusing to act, she felt the crushing weight of defeat. Yet her faithful determination would simply not allow her to remain complacent. She remembered those final hushed instructions the Queen had whispered just before her fateful departure into the shadows. One final glimmer of hope remained hidden far below the sunlit terrestrial surface, where Enlil's brother, an incredibly wise water god named Enki, resided within the depths of the freshwater ocean, a boundless aquatic refuge known to early priests as the Apsu. Ninshuba traveled swiftly toward his mysterious watery domain to present her final petition, approaching those cool, tranquil shores with a renewed sense of urgency burning in her chest. Her ragged garments fluttered softly in the gentle breeze, sweeping off those glassy southern seas. Here, Enki served as the supreme keeper of esoteric magic, possessing an in-depth knowledge of arcane incantations which whisper of a sorcery older than time. The ancient priests even claimed he fashioned humanity itself from pure river clay and the divine blood of the gods. And in his great wisdom, he possessed a uniquely profound understanding of how fragile the balance of reality truly was. He listened closely to the desperate recounting of her tragic tale, immediately recognizing the devastating consequences of leaving the goddess of love and war, of light and motion, suspended forever in darkness. Without her vibrant energy, our earthly garden would slowly wither into dry dust. She had provided the earliest formative soils with the fertility needed to develop barren wastelands into a lush oasis of plenty. She had led whole armies into victorious battles, empire after glorious empire. And according to various texts, it was she who bestowed the gift of knowledge, the Holy May, upon the very first antediluvian kings of ancient Sumeria, kings who descended from the heavens to guide the dawn of mankind into the glorious civilizations they were destined to build. She was the twin sibling of the sun god Shemesh and the equalizing force to her darker counterpart and sister, the queen of the Underworld. The heavy burdens of that dark kingdom were never meant to permanently extinguish such a magnificent light. With her imprisonment, the silent dust of Ker had claimed a vital piece of our planetary alignment, leaving the beautiful harmony which connected them entirely broken. A world stripped of all passion could not possibly sustain its blooming populations. Enki knew that her eternal slumber would ultimately unravel the delicate cosmic tapestry governing all natural cycles. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it would come as inevitably as the rising tides. The wise water deity felt a deep well of compassion rising within his chest, and in that moment Ninshubur had finally found the hero she needed. Enki agreed to orchestrate an unprecedented rescue mission from his watery throne. But overcoming those strict laws would require immense ingenuity, not sheer force. He could not send mighty warriors or rely upon traditional weapons to breach its gates. Rescuing Inanna would demand a completely different kind of strategy, one which would require his arcane knowledge to bend the very fabric of reality itself. Marching glorious celestial warriors down into those lightless corridors would only provoke a devastating cosmic war, one there was no hope of winning, because the unforgiving ordinance of her dark domain was specifically designed to keep out powerful immortals seeking to breach its gates. To safely navigate through the impenetrable fortress of Ganzir, whose very peak served as the entrance to the Underworld, meant finding a way to operate outside all recognized boundaries of natural existence. And so, in the soothing stillness of his beautiful aquatic domain, the wise water god began to craft a wonderful and unexpected solution. He knelt softly beside the tranquil shores of his freshwater abyss to gather the most pure of raw earthen sediments, mixing the loose soil with sweet river currents to produce a highly pliable clay. He pressed this enchanted mud carefully between his fingers to fashion something our cosmos had never seen before. In yet another brilliant and miraculous act of creation, two entirely new entities took shape within those cool shadows of the sunken temple. The ancient scribes recorded their obscure names as Kurgaru and Awakalaturu, strange beings whose mere existence is nearly impossible to comprehend. Brilliantly engineered to exist within the quiet interdimensional space between realities. They were fashioned without any specific gender, and their unusual forms were neither fully divine nor entirely human in their fundamental nature, rendering them virtually invisible to rigid checkpoints guarding the great below. Such a profound detachment from the ordinary patterns of universe granted them a peculiar kind of invulnerability. The crushing gravity of deep bedrock simply could not anchor their ethereal bodies. Floating gracefully above the damp clay floors of the Apsu, the wise water god knew that their unusual nature was perfectly suited for such a perilous mission. He observed their weightless movements with a quiet sense of satisfaction. These mysterious species represented yet another supreme victory of his biological mastery over creation. Being wonderfully formless allowed these tiny creatures to slip past the massive wooden gates of Ker like a gentle draught of dusty air. Enki leaned closely to whisper specific instructions into their newly formed minds. He prepared his unusual ambassadors for a delicate interaction with Ereshkigal, the queen of the Underworld. His voice rang with a deep reverberation, to which they listened with absolute obedience. The return of the morning star relied completely upon their ability to display genuine compassion. They were not to demand her immediate release, or threaten the Dark Queen with celestial retribution. Their only weapon would be an overwhelming display of profound cosmic empathy. To ensure that a successful resurrection could actually take place in such a barren realm, he entrusted them with two sacred elements. The mysterious food of life was placed gently into the waiting hands of his first creation, while a precious vial containing the restorative water of life was carefully given to his second messenger. These potent items carried the concentrated essence of vitality itself, the only substances capable of reversing the gaze of death that had been instilled by the seven dreaded judges. Having been given these provisions, those two unusual messengers turned away from the shimmering pools of the Apsu to begin their silent descent. Their journey downward was remarkably swift, as they floated effortlessly through narrow earthen fissures. The heavy shadows stretching across those dusty corridors posed absolutely no threat to their fluid shapes. They navigated around Neti, the imposing gatekeeper, without making a single sound against the cold stone floors. The massive gates of cedar timber and tarnished copper offered no resistance to their ghostly progression. They drifted peacefully across those seven towering thresholds, the very same ones that had previously stripped their celestial sovereign of her power. Soon they arrived at the grand lapis lazuli throne room, where they felt the immense gravity of the earth pressing inward. This stunning architecture had been carved directly from pure bedrock to create a lightless palace. Polished blue stones caught the faintest of ethereal light, creating a cinematic contrast against the heavy dust, an awe-inspiring monument dedicated to the endless slumber of all departed souls. Stepping across the final boundary would normally strip away all remaining traces of worldly comfort. Its oppressive atmosphere was specifically calibrated to extinguish the last lingering sparks of terrestrial ambition. But these weightless emissaries glided effortlessly through that stagnant chill, without a single shiver. A low rhythmic groaning now echoed against those dark polished walls, which muted them like a stifled whimper. The formidable queen of departed souls was not sitting proudly upon her exalted seat of power. Instead, she lay curled upon the bare floor, struggling under the exhausting burdens of her domain. A deep weariness consumed her entire trembling form, as her dark dominion offered no comfort for this overwhelming distress. Those tiny emissaries fluttered silently down into the dim chamber, in a gentle approach. Rather than announcing their presence with loud demands, they simply sat down closely beside her. They matched their breathing perfectly to the pained gasps of the suffering monarch, a quiet alignment that created a deeply comforting resonance. The cool, stagnant breeze barely brushed against their unusual forms as they kept patient vigil, remaining perfectly focused on their delicate task while providing emotional sanctuary. When the heavy burdens of her domain caused her to cry out at her aching insides, they gently echoed her exact words. When she wept for her tired external form, they offered that same sympathetic response, functioning as a compassionate mirror to validate her immense struggle. This simple act of shared sorrow brought a deep wave of relief to her exhausted spirit. Never before had anyone dared to sympathize with the terrifying ruler of the great below. Their genuine empathy had served to soothe the agonizing isolation that defined her dark existence. The heavy air of her throne room felt remarkably lighter as her painful groans began to slowly subside. A deep gratitude welled up within her chest toward these strange and gentle visitors. She looked upon their unusual forms with a sudden desire to reward their unprecedented kindness. And so, the grateful queen offered her soothing companions the bountiful gift of flowing river water. But they politely declined this generous reward. She then offered them a tremendously rich harvest of field grain, waiting for their joyful acceptance. Earthly rulers would have gladly sacrificed their grandest temples for such pure subterranean bounty, for these pristine elements held enough power to fertilize all the vast agricultural fields on the surface. Yet those unearthly messengers remained completely unswayed. They had no need for worldly sustenance, because they were sustained entirely by ancient magic. Ereshkigal was deeply puzzled by their refusal of her greatest treasures. But they had not descended into this terrifying void to claim any manufactured glory. She implored them to name any desired prize within her vast kingdom. The pivotal moment for their ultimate request had finally arrived. They raised their hands slowly and pointed toward the ancient lapis lazuli wall, where Inanna remained suspended upon the dark blue stone. They asked only for the motionless form of the fallen celestial goddess. Ereshkigal hesitated as she considered this highly unusual petition. Releasing a condemned prisoner directly contradicted the strict laws governing her dusty empire, but the profound comfort they had provided her carried an equally binding cosmic weight, and such a sacred exchange of favors demanded that she honor their single modest request. She agreed to surrender the pale suspended figure to her strange new guests. Those tiny creatures moved swiftly toward the faded silhouette of the once radiant queen, preparing to initiate a spectacular reversal of fate, an act which would stretch the bounds of the cosmos and test the very fabric of reality itself. A magnificent spark of revival was about to break the oppressive silence of Kur. That sacred nourishment of the gods hummed with a vibrant energy inside their hands, as they hovered gently over her stilled vessel to begin their miraculous restoration, a breathtaking resurrection that proves that even our darkest endings hold the promise of new life. Those tiny emissaries hovered gently, holding the sacred nourishment of their wise creator. A heavy silence dominated the sprawling lapis lazuli throne room, pressing inward against their ethereal forms. One gently sprinkled the mysterious food of life over her pale, motionless silhouette. The second messenger carefully poured the restorative water of life across her resting frame. This sacred infusion bridged the gap between the silence of the dark and the light of the living world, flowing smoothly into her empty veins. A magnificent spark of life broke the oppressive gloom, as a warm inner glow slowly returned to her skin. Radiant celestial energy blossomed outward from her chest, illuminating the dark blue stone of the surrounding chamber. The fallen star opened her eyes, drawing a deep breath. Her brilliant life force had been completely restored, breaking the deep slumber of the 7 dreaded judges. She stepped down from her suspended position, standing proudly once again before her solemn sister. Her beautiful light pushed back against the heavy shadows, casting long, dancing reflections across polished stone walls. A profound cosmic decree had been successfully reversed, defying every known parameter of the great below. She prepared to begin her long ascent back toward the sunlit world above. But escaping such heavy gravity required far more than a magical act of restoration. An ancient debt still remains. Here, the ultimate hidden law of the Underworld was suddenly revealed, halting her graceful departure. The cosmic accounting of our universe dictates that life and death must always remain in perfect equilibrium. The Empire of Ker cannot simply be cheated out of its rightful permanent inhabitants. This strict rule demanded a heavy price for any souls seeking to leave the shadows. If our radiant goddess wished to rise back into the light, another soul must be sent down to take her place in the dust. The delicate scales of existence demanded that all abide by this absolute law of substitution, to preserve the flawless universal order. To enforce this uncompromising decree, a dreaded group of ancient guardians was summoned directly from the void. Not the fierce judges of the Underworld, for now their job was done. These silent escorts were known to early scribes as the Gala Demons, guardians of the shadows, and minions to Ereshkigal. They were emotionless keepers of the balance, bound completely to the quiet currents of the deep earth. Such formless entities possessed no understanding of human mercy, comforting warmth, or mortal love. They functioned simply as a flawless system of enforcement. Designed to protect the unbreakable foundation of reality, dragging defiant lost souls to the underworld like tireless bounty hunters when necessary. The conditions of her release had been decreed, and now these terrifying figures gathered closely behind the glowing Queen of Heaven, preparing to follow her back to the surface to ensure that the price was paid in full. She solemnly accepted this chilling stipulation, turning her back on the imposing dark throne. Her long journey upward through ancient dust of the 7 towering thresholds was finally set into motion. She walked resolutely past massive cedar timbers, crossing back over the 7th gate. Her solitary footsteps echoed softly against the cold bedrock, carrying her away from that dark but awe-inspiring sanctuary. And all the while, those mysterious shadowy attendants glided quietly in her wake, their formless bodies blending perfectly into the heavy gloom. With every threshold, the crushing weight of those heavy stone walls began to gently lift from her tired shoulders. Slowly, the oppressive dust gave way to a faint, cool breeze, sweeping down from the upper atmosphere to greet her like an old friend. The dark architecture of narrow corridors gradually brightened through every gate, marking her steady return toward the world of the living. She retrieved her discarded worldly garments at each passing checkpoint, reclaiming her recognized identity step by step. Her majestic royal robe was draped softly over her shivering form once again, and the lapis lazuli measuring rod found its way back into her waiting hands, restoring her connection to human progress. Her precious golden ring and glowing breastplate were secured tightly to her body once again. She fastened her shimmering blue necklace across her collarbone, feeling its familiar celestial weight. Those winding pathways grew increasingly wide as she moved further away from the central heart of Ker. The immense isolation of the deep earth faded into a distant memory, replaced by a growing anticipation of familiar starry skies. Ascending through these dusty passageways had felt like slowly waking from a long dream, as the stagnant chill of the underworld dissolved into a refreshing memory of blooming orchards and warm sunlight. She moved with a hypnotic grace, eager to reunite with her sprawling green valleys. Yet a terrifying reality still trailed just a few steps behind. Those silent keepers of the balance hovered closely, a constant reminder of the staggering debt she still owed. Their chilling presence cast a lingering shadow over her joyous restoration, adding a heavy burden to her rising spirit. She pondered the immense weight of this cosmic ritual, wondering who must be sacrificed to satisfy their unforgiving demand. Her eventual return as the morning star would require a profound test of loyalty from those she had left behind. Someone in the waking world would have to surrender their earthly vitality to take her place. Her clever contingency plan may have saved her life, but it had not paid her ransom. The inescapable pull of the underworld reached upward with her in the form of those dark guardians, threatening to claim a new victim from her beloved sanctuaries, or take her own soul back to the depths if she failed. She approached the last gate of her exit, the entrance to Ganzir, where a dim, lightless room marked the absolute edge of mortal awareness. Finally, her grand crown was placed proudly upon her head once again, restoring her ultimate seal of social authority, as she finally passed through the threshold of the first gate. Those heavy wooden doors groaned open to reveal a starry night sky, rotating peacefully above familiar mud-brick temples. She stepped across this ultimate boundary, leaving the dusty empire behind her. A warm night breeze rustled softly through quiet palm orchards, almost as though it was welcoming her back to the sprawling plains. The sweet fragrance of blooming night flowers washed over her tired senses, grounding her mind in the presence of their vibrant aromas. But this breathtaking rescue was only half complete. The shadow attendants waited patiently at her heels, ready to enforce her debt. Their formless shapes lingered just beyond the glow of flickering oil lamps, like a dark stain against the pristine earthly garden. This daring goddess must now search the sleeping metropolis to find a suitable replacement, and her miraculous revival would carry a far darker consequence than she already realized, setting the stage for a tragic tale of judgment. She must look into the hearts of her followers to see who truly mourned her devastating absence. This test of the upper world would soon expose the fragile nature of terrestrial loyalty, alongside a blinding arrogance of mortal pride. The cosmic accounting of our universe remained unsettled, demanding an immediate payment to balance the scales. The radiant Queen of Heaven drifted softly through the warm night air, glowing like a brilliant celestial ember against the darkness. She was embarking on a profound test, closely followed by those silent demonic keepers of the balance. She guided this chilling entourage toward her most devoted sanctuaries. Her glowing silhouette first arrived at the quiet mud-brick walls belonging to the city of Uma. Here, the protecting deity known as Shara was found sitting humbly in the dry dirt, stripped entirely of his divine glory. He had covered his form in rough sackcloth to symbolize his deep internal sorrow, groveling low against the dusty earth. This humble display of grief proved his unwavering devotion to the delicate scales of existence. Recognizing his profound respect for the cosmic balance, our radiant goddess felt a warm wave of compassion wash over her spirit. She immediately restrained her silent escorts, sparing this loyal deity from the crushing grip of the deep earth. The somber procession then moved gracefully onward toward another ancient settlement, known to early scribes as Bad Tibira. A gentle night breeze rustled through the surrounding grasslands, carrying the heavy scent of sweet river water across dark fields. Within these quiet borders, she found the guardian deity Latarak, who had also surrendered his earthly comforts. Draped entirely in ruined garments, his face pressed firmly into the cold clay in absolute despair. He wept bitterly for the missing morning star, demonstrating a pure understanding of the immense sacrifice taking place below. Touched deeply by his genuine sorrow, she held back those formless guardians once again, allowing this devoted caretaker to safely remain in the sunlit world. The towering temple complex in her beloved city of Uruk finally appeared on the flat eastern horizon, marking the ultimate destination of her fateful journey. This sprawling metropolis was the crowning jewel of her celestial domain, buzzing with a quiet energy even in the depths of night. She paused briefly before those massive palace walls, anticipating a tearful reunion with her beloved earthly partner. Her heart fully expected to find Dumuzi the Shepherd King, drowning in a similar state of overwhelming grief. He was her chosen husband, a mortal ruler elevated to a glorious throne to share in her radiant majesty. Surely this intimate companion would be shattered by the sudden loss of her vibrant motion, taking shelter in the shadows to weep, as was their respectful custom. She stepped cautiously across the grand threshold of her own sanctuary, accompanied closely by her hungry entourage. Warm light from the flickering oil lamps danced across polished stone surfaces, revealing a scene that defied all cosmic expectation. A shocking display of mortal pride waited patiently within those beautifully decorated halls. Instead of weeping in the dust, the Shepherd King sat comfortably upon his high wooden seat. He was dressed in magnificent royal garments, draped in heavy golden jewelry that caught the bright glow of burning cedar resin. A striking aura of unchecked authority radiated from his relaxed posture, showing absolutely no sign of distress. He was quietly celebrating his unchallenged dominion, rather than mourning the devastating absence of his queen. His lavish attire, alongside a comfortable repose, revealed a complete disregard for the fragile boundaries separating life from death, and spoke nothing of his supposed devotion. Such blinding arrogance demonstrated a profound ignorance of the sacrifices that had been made to preserve her light, as well as a general lack of empathy. A sudden wave of intense betrayal washed over the restored goddess, completely eclipsing her joyous return to the sunlit surface. She realized that her beloved partner had easily forgotten her radiant light, content to simply bask in the warm glow of her abandoned glory. To claim such unearned majesty, while his celestial counterpart suffered in a lightless void, was an unforgivable cosmic transgression. The delicate machinery of the heavens required absolute humility from those chosen to guide its earthly populations, lest they fall to sheer corruption. His proud display threatened to unravel the flawless harmony, a harmony her saviors had already taken drastic measures to preserve. Enraged by his ego, Inanna took a slow, very deliberate step toward the elevated dais. She raised her gaze to meet his surprised expression, focusing all of her divine authority into a single devastating look. And in that moment she fastened the eye of absolute stillness directly upon him, freezing the Shepherd King entirely in his place. Summoned by the call, those shapeless enforcers drifted silently into the flickering light, surrounding the now terrified mortal ruler. Their chilling presence dropped the ambient temperature of this grand hall, instantly extinguishing the warm comfort provided by his stolen glory. Silence wrapped tightly around his shivering shoulders like a living entity, as the intense gravity of the underworld prepared to collect its due. The radiant goddess then delivered the heavy decree of guilt officially surrendering her husband to the shadows with a single word. It was a tragic, yet necessary judgment, meant to permanently restore the delicate scales of universal balance. Dumuzi had been chosen to take her place in the dust, suffering a dark consequence for his betrayal. The once proud king of Uruk was suddenly forced to confront the terrifying reality of his impending descent. A frantic desperation flooded his mind as those emotionless guardians reached out to claim his vibrant life force. He prepared to flee into the darkness in a desperate evasion that would test the very limits of human endurance. He quickly abandoned his beautifully carved wooden throne to escape into the surrounding shadows of the great city, initiating a relentless pursuit across the sprawling Mesopotamian plains, one that has been forever recorded in the mysterious Sumerian poem of Dumuzi's dream. He dashed quickly past those smooth clay walls, leaving his lavish royal garments entirely behind him, in the dust. He sought refuge within familiar agricultural landscapes to which he had once tended with devotion. Now, running like a frightened animal through the wilderness, he felt an intense chill radiating from those silent bounty hunters who drifted effortlessly in his wake. Every frantic footstep kicked up small clouds of dry soil, marking his erratic path across the flat terrain. Soft night breezes swept gently across quiet canals, rustling through tall marsh reeds. The heavy silence of this resting world contrasted sharply against his loud and frantic breathing. The shepherd king bounded through deep ditches, hoping to evade an inescapable cosmic fate. He navigated a complicated network of irrigation channels, utilizing his intimate knowledge of local geography. His bare feet slipped against the wet river mud, but overwhelming fear pushed him ever forward. He desperately sought a secure hiding place, moving among thick groves of swaying date palms. Looking up toward the sky, he pleaded for divine assistance to outrun the intense gravity of Ker. He cried out into the cool air, attempting to reach the radiant sun deity Utu, otherwise known as Shamash. This glorious solar lord listened to his agonizing request with profound compassion. He recognized the immense weight of those strict underworld decrees, threatening to swallow his earthly companion. And so, the sun god decided to grant a temporary physical transformation to aid this desperate flight. Golden rays of esoteric magic filtered down to bathe the fleeing king in a warm glow. His exhausted physical form began to shift, guided by the flawless geometry of celestial spells. His mortal hands and human legs dissolved seamlessly, morphed into the swift limbs of a graceful gazelle. This incredible transformation allowed Dumuzi to dash effortlessly across the dry dirt and shifting sands. His newly acquired animalistic senses perceived the surrounding environment with striking clarity. The winding paths of dense marshlands offered a labyrinth of temporary safety. He navigated these muddy trails with an instinctual grace, trusting his newly formed hooves to find solid ground. The sweet fragrance of blooming night flowers and earthen river mud masked his scent from the approaching darkness. He bounded across wide-open meadows with incredible agility, perfectly mimicking the wild creatures of the rolling plains. The natural world offered camouflage, blending his silhouette into the dark foliage. But those silent keepers of the universal balance continued their steady pursuit, without a single pause. Such formless entities require absolutely no nourishment or fresh water. No tired muscles need resting, and no respite of shade was needed to sustain their energy. They moved like a creeping frost over dry ground, completely unaffected by any physical obstacles of the rough terrain. Deep trenches offered no resistance to their ghostly, hovering progression, and they tracked his vibrant life force with a terrifying precision. A faint mist began to roll slowly across those muddy banks as this relentless chase wore on. Dumuzi leaped gracefully over narrow irrigation channels, attempting to outpace his shadowy escorts. He tried desperately to sever all ties to the quiet currents of the great below. Eventually, he hid himself deep within a dense cluster of towering reeds, holding his breath as those cold shadows drifted silently past. The gentle lapping of river water against soft clay provided a soothing natural disguise for his location, and for a fleeting moment he believed he had successfully outsmarted the ancient laws of the cosmos. But it would be to no avail. Those dark demons seemed to sense his very presence. He burst from his hiding place in a final frantic sprint across the starlit meadows. His hooves struck hardened soil with a rhythmic drumming, echoing into the empty expanse. The chilling otherworldly presence followed closely at his heels, blanketing the surrounding earth in a heavy frost. Every desperate leap carried him closer to complete physical exhaustion. The sprawling agricultural fields he had once commanded now felt like an endless, punishing maze. He longed for a peaceful rest. The looming threat lurking at his heels kept his legs moving, but his stamina began to wane under the immense pressure of this cosmic hunt. By night, the radiant magic of the sun god would slowly fade from his tired muscles, returning him to his vulnerable human form. By day, he would transform back into a graceful gazelle, navigating blindly through familiar pastures, seeking one last bastion of earthly refuge. He eventually found his way toward a familiar and deeply comforting sheepfold. This quiet sanctuary belonged to his devoted divine sister, a legendary poet and immortal scribe. He collapsed heavily into soft pasture grass to catch his breath under the pale moonlight. His chest heaved with exhaustion as he surrendered to the enclosed boundaries of a wooden pen. The familiar scent of resting flocks offered a fleeting sense of security, and he briefly closed his heavy eyes to absorb the peaceful and ambient noises of the sleeping world. But mortal evasion can never permanently outrun such undeniable rules, no matter how well one stays hidden. The invisible pull of the lower world stretched long across those vast plains, tugging at his heavy limbs. The gala demons circled around his hidden sanctuary, drawn by an undeniable cosmic tether. Their formless shapes merged with the natural darkness of the surrounding foliage, closing in from every possible direction. These tireless shadow attendants had finally arrived. Their chilling presence brought a sudden drop in ambient temperatures within the enclosure. They stepped forward with a firm determination to collect their cosmic due. There was no inherent malice in their deliberate movements, only a cold adherence to the universal design. They reached out to claim his fading spark, enforcing the heavy law of substitution. The fragile equilibrium of life and death was about to be permanently restored. Dumuzi offered no further resistance to these quiet keepers of the ancient abyss. He now recognized the staggering futility in fighting such a binding pull, the kind of gravity that eventually claims all living things. With the halt of his earthly reign, the heavy debt required to resurrect the morning star was officially settled in the thick dust. The radiant energy of his soul was gently pulled downward into the silent and lightless void, where he began his own long descent through the 7 gates of the Underworld toward the dark stone throne room. Despite this tragic earthly judgment, the delicate scales of existence returned to a perfectly balanced equilibrium, but a vital piece of celestial machinery had been sacrificed to preserve the natural order, and the surrounding landscape absorbed this monumental loss with a quiet grace, the grace of a land that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless mortal and immortal reigns. Slow-moving stars continued to trace the predictable pathways across the dark canopy overhead. Yet this breathtaking story does not end in a permanent state of loss, as the dedication of one sibling and the regrets of a loving wife would shine through this dark night, preparing to orchestrate a beautiful compromise of love and sacrifice, one that would change the way we chart our years to this day. As the Shepherd King faced an eternity within the dusty abyss, his divine sister watched this tragic departure with an unwavering compassion radiating from her heavy heart. She was known to early scribes as Inanna, a legendary poetess who resided among the tall, swaying river reeds. This immortal scribe possessed a deeply sensitive spirit that simply could not accept the permanent loss of her beloved sibling. She stepped bravely away from comforting safety provided by her sunlit pastures to embark upon that same perilous journey. Her solitary footsteps carried her purposefully down into the crushing gravity of the great below. Arriving before that imposing dark throne, she offered a breathtaking display of pure familial loyalty. She pleaded passionately with the solemn ruler of departed souls to share his heavy burden. A mesmerizing compromise was finally struck within those silent stone walls, satisfying the unyielding demand for universal balance. Inanna witnessed this stunning act of devotion with a remarkably softened spirit. The intense wave of betrayal she had once felt was slowly replaced by a lingering regret over his loss. She accepted and even helped to negotiate this divided arrangement to maintain equilibrium across her sprawling terrestrial domains. It was officially decreed that Dumuzi would dwell in those lightless depths for 1/2 of a slowly turning year. Inanna would then courageously take his place in the dust for all remaining months of their calendar. A divine exchange which established a flawless mechanism of rotation while perfectly satisfying the strict laws of substitution. Because in the eyes of the ancients this profound agreement was no mere negotiation to a tragic tale of mortal and immortal pride. It was a divine pact which mirrored the mesmerizing birth of our shifting agricultural seasons. Whenever Dumuzi begins his long descent into the depths of the earth, the Mesopotamian plains experience a dormant dryness. Vast fields go to sleep, withering under the scorching summer heat, quietly mourning his temporary absence from the surface. Rich river soil hardens into cracked clay as vital moisture retreats far below the sun-baked ground. Early populations understood this arid period as a direct reflection of his time spent in the lightless void. A quiet patience settles over the sprawling landscape while it waits for his inevitable return to the light. During these months, mortal workers would retreat into their shaded mud-brick dwellings to seek refuge from the unforgiving solar glare. They suspend their heavy farming tools to honor the quiet period of necessary agricultural rest. And when his allotted time in the shadows was over, his loyal sister descends to honor her promise. Dumuzi rises slowly from deep earth to reunite with his celestial queen among the living populations. Their joyful reconciliation brings a sudden surge of vibrant energy back to a waking world above. Fresh sweet water swells within winding canals, rushing smoothly over parched clay banks to nourish thirsty roots. The brilliant blooming of spring transforms barren deltas into a lush oasis of green abundance. They had created a predictable cycle of rest and renewal, proving that the dark realm of the Netherworld is merely a resting place, not a permanent end. Life simply waits in hidden forms before sprouting anew across the fertile valleys of the earth. This sacred rhythm of a divided year anchors the entire terrestrial world in a profound state of grace, where every season of darkness is merely a necessary pause before the inevitable return of the light. A harmonious balance tethers the towering heavens above to silent depths of the earth below, and all the while the epic chronicle of Inanna and her beloved king lives forever within the ancient clay, standing as a timeless mirror of the cosmic laws that shape existence itself. This pristine earthen material serves as a permanent vessel, acting to beautifully capture her profound celestial journey. There is a comforting solace in knowing that such magnificent histories are preserved flawlessly beneath our very own feet. As the quiet night deepens over the vast mud-brick sanctuaries, the heavy shadows of the valley cradle the world in a protective embrace. The cooling breeze along the riverbanks softly dissolves the final echoes of the past, guiding the entire landscape into a deep and beautiful trance of undisturbed sleep. Shifting agricultural seasons rotate with a flawless precision, acting to perfectly mirror the cosmic compromise of the gods. A warm night breeze rustles softly through swaying palm orchards and sweeps gracefully across those vast plains of Mesopotamia. Dim oil lamps flicker slowly along smooth mud brick walls, casting long dancing shadows across calm waters of winding water channels. The morning star of Venus returns to the eastern horizon, where the magnificent star-speckled sky has patiently watched these shifting tides of antiquity slowly rise and fade throughout the millennia. Thousands of distant luminous spheres provide a glowing silver canopy over the ancient kingdoms, illuminating an otherwise dark expanse. They chart an endless celestial map for wandering spirits to follow, revealing the deepest secrets of our collective history. The unbroken breathing of the earth synchronizes perfectly with this absolute harmony of the cosmos. A gentle ambient temperature wraps their sleeping settlements in a deeply protective embrace, where every slow exhalation aligns beautifully with the ever-turning cycles of our past and present. We float effortlessly along these smooth currents of deep time, drifting further and further away into a vast ocean of history that cradles our drifting consciousness within a mesmerizing tide of absolute peace. All lingering traces of fatigue simply dissolve into the pure essence of serene starlight. Those quiet courtyards of the early tablet houses have finally laid their slender reed styluses down to rest. Countless damp records still sleep soundly beneath the canopy of night, keeping their immense secrets completely safe from the shifting winds of passing eons. This profound stillness preserves the timeless magic of a forgotten era, forgotten but never lost. Not entirely, because while their records live on, the same sweet freshwater aquifers continue to bubble softly beneath sun-baked landscapes, like a gentle magic nourishing the deep roots of our world. It hums with a soothing resonance, ensuring that the fragile spark of life will never fade. And the beautiful goddess of love and light maintains a patient and eternal vigil across the sparkling tapestry of the highest heavens. Her guiding light remains a constant companion for all mankind, forever anchoring us to this pristine foundation of perfect cosmic order. Our shared cultural memory becomes a timeless floating vessel, carrying us safely through the vast expanse of undisturbed space. We drift slowly, softly into the peaceful embrace of night, knowing that this enduring legacy beautifully connects every living soul to the magnificent dawn of early creation. We rest completely unified within an everlasting heartbeat that guides us all in time.